demanded me to come back, which I did. I had no choice. So I went back to Eastern Maryland from Baltimore. And when I got back, Master Tommy, he was a mean master. He did not play. As a matter of fact, he was whipping my brother. And he told me, I got the nerve to whip you the same way, Frederick. But even more so, you see this foot? To throw you down and take my foot and just smash your head to the ground. I have the nerve to do that. I didn't know what I had walked back into. Because I'll be honest with you, in Baltimore, I was spoiled. And then I found myself coming back to be a who? A real slave. That was terror to me. Well, ma'am, that education that I was getting while I was in Baltimore, I started putting that education back to work again. And I stayed with Master Thomas for a while. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old. I overheard Master Tommy telling Mr. Lucretia, you know, at Frederick, he's getting to be too much. His mouth, something tells me he's been dipping in somebody's educational tool. Now, I did mention earlier about Mr. Lawson. I befriend him, and I learned a lot from him. And religion became my friend. So much so that Master Thomas Ard farmed me out. He farmed me out to the slave breaker. The slave breaker, no other than Master Corbet. When a slave was sent to Master Corbet for that 12-month, 365 days in that year, at the end of that year, I guarantee you that that slave is broken. That slave is whipped so badly that there's no other choice but to say, yes, Master. Master, what would you like me to do? Master, you's a good master. Master, I want to live and die with you, Master. That's how bad those slaves had been whipped. And when I stepped on that plantation, I have you know, when I walked on it, because I was kind of pompous for myself at 16 years old. When I walked on that plantation, this is how I walked on. 6 months later, you saw me, this is how I was walking. Yes, Master. Anything you want, Master. Get over there. Yes, Master. I can get over there, Master. And I've had a lot of whips on me. And by the time that 6 month came, my skin was bruised. There were marks all over my back and my legs and my neck from those whippings with that whip. From no other than the snake. That's what we call him. Why did we call him the snake? We called him the snake, ladies and gentlemen, because primarily he did not have slave of his own. It was almost like he was a farm, a training farm. So the slaves that he had, they were farmed out to him. When he didn't have slaves, he had to do the work himself. So him doing the work himself earned him the title of the snake. Because, ma'am, he knew exactly how everything should do. So if he told us he's getting on his horse and he's going to town, we fell into it because we believed he was going to town. Ladies and gentlemen, he went to town. He went right out there to the bushes, tied his horse up. We couldn't see, so we figured he was going to the bush, to the town. And the leaves and the cornfields and whatnot was so tall, he could sneak right back in without us knowing. And next thing you know, it's like, what are you doing? Why are you not working? He just snuck up on something. And I'll never forget that day, myself and 3 other slaves, we was out fanning the mill, and I got a pain in my side, and next thing I know, one of the slaves like, Freddie, you better get up. You better get up. I can't. You better get up. And next thing I know, because I couldn't get up, who was standing over me? No other than Master Corbet. And he asked me so kindly, he said, Fred, what's wrong? He didn't say, what's wrong? What's wrong, Fred? And I fell into his trap. And I said, oh, master, my side, I can't get up. Oh, your side. I said, yes, master, my side. Well, I have you know, he kicked me right in my side. And then he wound up pulling a stem off the tree and started commencing to whip me with it, so much so that he cracked my skull. Now I'm bleeding down on my clothes. I managed to get up. I don't know where I got the strength from to run 7 miles back to Master Thomas Ard's house. And when I got in that house bleeding, I said, Master, please remove me, because he's killing me, he's whipping me. Master Thomas Ard, all he did, he just stood up and he said, Freddie, if you don't go back, I'll whip you and kill you myself. I told you about Mr. Lucretia. Mr. Lucretia and I had blood. She didn't know it, but we had blood. And being that we had blood, she was so beautiful and kind to come out of her mouth and say, Thomas, let Freddie stay. I thought she was going to say, let him stay forever. Because she said, let Freddie stay, and then she paused. That's when she said, for the night. So she allowed me to go up and clean myself and rest myself. Sir, it was Friday night. That next morning, I awakened to a smell. Yeah, a smell. It was Saturday morning. What smell did I awaken? She's like, I hope it wasn't one of those smells. No. It was the kind of smell that get all of our stomachs growling. It was a breakfast smell. Yes. It was the kind of smell that consisted of eggs, bacon, and ma'am, it ain't the kind of bacon that they have today when you go to Publix over there to the breakfast section to get it. It's the kind of egg, sir, this is the kind of bacon where you get the chunk of it and you got to get your little axe out and you got to shave it just right. She's laughing like, yes, baby, I was back there. Yes, I lived right next door to the Arts. I remember that day. And then they had what was called flapjacks. I don't think anybody here know what those flapjacks are. Oh, see, there she goes. You must be Miss Lucretia. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce you to my sister. Yes, flapjacks. And to top it off with milk. Well, as I'm coming down the stairwell, ma'am, quite naturally, as we walk, we can hear ourselves. Raise your hand if you can hear yourself walk. Yeah. When your shoe hit the ground, you can hear that. When you're coming down the stairwell, you can hear that when you got your shoes on. Well, when I came down that stairwell, I couldn't hear me coming down because my doggone stomach was making too much of a loud noise. Growling. So when I got downstairs into the kitchen, I went to go take a seat. I have you know, Master stood up and he just pointed his hand. Frederick, if you don't get out of here. So I managed to go ahead on and leave, making my way back to the plantation of Master Corbet. And when I got back to that plantation, who was coming? Who was coming? Master Corbet was coming. What did he have in his hand? He had a whip. Ladies and gentlemen, I had my right leg. I was getting ready to go over the fence. When I saw him coming with that whip, ladies and gentlemen, I kindly took this same leg back across that fence, and I shot out of there. When I left from out of there, I ran into a Mr. and Mrs. living out in a cabin in the woods. The Mr. and Mrs., forgive me, I forgot their name, but they were black. Matter of fact, they were free blacks living out there. The Mr. grabbed me, they allowed me to stay the night, and he took me out to the field, sir, and he said, come, Freddie, I want to show you something. I want to give you something. He gets out there and he starts digging like a dog. He pulls out a rabbit foot. And he says, Freddie, I promise you, if you take this rabbit foot and you put it in your right pocket, you will never get a whipping again. And I told him, I said, you know, I don't believe in superstition. He said, okay, well, don't believe in it. Go back and get your whipping. I said, you know what, give me that. And I put it in my pocket. And when I got there back on that plantation that Sunday, ladies and gentlemen, I put that leg back over there. Who's coming at me now? Master's coming at me. Master and his wife coming at me, Mr. and Mrs. Corbett. And when he approached me, he said, come on over. Come on over, Freddie. So I clammed over the bench, and I have you know, he put his arm around my shoulder, and he started walking with me. How you doing, Freddie? I was doing okay, Master. Lift your head up, Freddie. Yes, Master. You having a good morning? Yes, Master. I couldn't believe it. He was what? Befriending me. He said, well, Freddie, go ahead on and take the rest of the day off. Yes, Master. You take the rest of the day off, and tomorrow I need you to do me a good favor, will you? I said, yes, Master. He said, I need you to go clean out the barn, clean the stalls out. Yes, Master. And him and Mrs. Corbett, they left. They left to go to church. Now, I got to add this in, since I said church. Master Corbett and his wife, they used to have Bible study at the house. And he would have me to come out, because he kind of figured I was touring around, so he would have me come out and sing. Dad, I was his choir. And then there were times that he would have other pastors come in, and we would be on the other side listening. And I'll never forget that pastor came over and he started praying, Lord God, be with us this evening, and be with those slaves on the other side of the door listening. Yes. Well, while I'm in this barn cleaning out the stall Monday morning, the door opened up, and who's there coming through the door? Master Corbett. Master Corbett's coming through the door. What do he have in his hand? He got a whip. And he's blowing that whip out, and it tied itself around my ankle. And you know, ma'am, I said to myself, this is it. And I leaned down, and I grabbed that whip, and I tied it around my wrist, and I started pulling him towards me. And as I pulled him towards me, I snatched that whip out of his hand, and we went round and round. Yes, for 2 hours. And in the midst of the 2 hours of us battling, my intentions was not to hurt him, but just to keep him off of me. So the majority of the time, I pushed him off of me. One time, I had to rope him in. Well, as I had him roped in, one of the slaves was walking by the name of Robert. He screamed, "Robert, help!" Yes, Master, what? Yes, Master. Come in and get Freddie off me. Excuse me? You didn't send me here for that. Bam. He walked back out. Another one come. Now this one, sir, I think he had too many blackjacks. Because he started coming in and to grab me. And as he went to grab me, I kicked him off. Well, when I kicked him off, you know what he did, right? He ran. Yeah. But Master had another young lady there. She was kind of obese. And I'll let you all know that if that lady would have got hold of me, that would have been the enemy. Because she was muscular. And really, all she had to do was just grab me by my little collar, and I would have been swinging just like that. Well, fortunately, she said, Master, that's between you and Freddie. I ain't got nothing to do with that. So you know what she did, ma'am? She turned around and she left. I wiped my ball, and then that's when I really went at him. Bam! That's right. And then he's going to have the audacity to stand up and say, Freddie, you lucky. Because I really could have beat you. I could have whipped you. You lucky. Today is your lucky day. And I said to myself, Master, you don't want none of this. You don't want none of this. And the next 6 months of me on that plantation, I have you know he never what? Raised his hand at me. Now, I will admit, he has said, don't let me get after you, Freddie. And I always said to myself, sir, you don't want none of this, so keep on moving. Now, if you was a slave that was strong, 9 times out of 10, they did not mess with you. If you was a weak slave, yes, they came after you. So, that rest of my time there, I never got whipped. So, just for the sake of time, let's move on to as I began. September 3rd, 1838. I made my way, like I said, to New York. Mr. Ruggles, he took me in. When he took me in, he allowed me to stay overnight. And ladies and gentlemen, when I woke up the next morning, who was sitting down in the parlor? Now the parlor nowadays is the living room. Who was sitting in the parlor? Anybody want to take a guess?
Lucretia.
Who?
Lucretia.
No, not Lucretia. other. And next thing you know, Mr. Ruggles summoned a preacher. The preacher came and he married me and Anna. And we got married at that time. And when we got married, we were allowed to stay that night. The next day, he had us to leave his home, even though we only had $5. So we had to leave some of the merchandise there, all right, as collateral, if you will. And we caught that train and we made our way up to New Bedford. When we got to New Bedford, ladies and gentlemen, life began to change. We wound up meeting a family by the name of Johnson. Now, it seemed like everybody in New Bedford name was Johnson. When we got there and we were introduced to the Johnsons, we go in their house, they served us dinner, and we had a discussion. And I told him, I said, you know, I think I'm not really friends with this name Johnson. Now, I do apologize, I did not tell you my birth name. Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey. That's a name, ain't it? Well, we came up with another name. And the gentleman said, I saw this play the other day. And in that play, they're named Douglas. And I said, who? He said, Douglas. I said, I want that name. But I must keep my surname of Frederick. I can't give up all of my identity. So I took the name of Douglas. Not only did I take the name of Douglas, I added another S to that Douglas. That other S made it Douglas. So they pronounced my name, Frederick Douglas. That sounds good. Everybody try that. Douglas. Yes. Oh, she's enjoying it. Okay? So anyway, we made our way, wound up having a little house. I'm out doing different jobs, working at the shipyard, etc., etc. So one day when I was working, a gentleman came to me and he says, hey, hey, hey! And I stopped. And he says, look, I got a newspaper here called The Liberator. You might be interested in it. And I said, well, how much is it? He says, 10 cents. I said, look, sir, I do not have 10 cents. I'm trying to raise my family. At this time, we had 3 kids. And that is, on the green board, my kids there. Ultimately, we wound up having 5 kids. My baby girl, Anna, she died at the age of 10 of a disease that they could not cure then, but they can cure it now. All right? So I was left with Rosetta, Charles, Lewis, and Frederick Jr. Those were my 4 who were still alive with me. Well, I wound up purchasing this paper called The Liberator, and I wound up going to these but anti-slave meetings. And when I would go, I would always sit in the back because I didn't want to be suspicious. I didn't want to be pointed out. I just wanted to be incognito. Well, one day a black gentleman saw me sitting back there and he came. He said, are you Frederick Douglass? I said, yes. And quite naturally, I'm starting to shake, you know, because I'm still a runaway slave. He said, I want to introduce you to someone. And I said, who would this be? He said, come, come. So he takes me and we go in the back room, the VIP room back there, or what it is called now. So I go in, there's this white gentleman, bald up top, little stringy hair and round. I don't know, ma'am, I don't know if I should say this because I don't want to get in trouble, but the heck, I'm going to go ahead and say it. He had on these round John Lennon glasses. And the gentleman says, Mr. Garrison, I want to introduce you to Frederick Douglass. And he says, Frederick! William Lord Garrison is my name. I've heard a lot about you. He shook my hand. He said, come on in. Tell us about yourself. We would like to have you speak. Now I'm about 23 years old. And I said, sir, I don't have no education. He says, but you speak so eloquently. You must have been reading something because you talk. You don't talk like a slave. I said, well, sir, I'll let you know that I went to the School of Whippings. And if you bring me on, I will graduate with my degree from the William Lord Garrison University. He said, you know, you got jokes. Well, he had me go out to speak that first evening, and ladies and gentlemen, as I looked out into the audience, I saw a sea of white folks with a little sprinkle of black folks. And it took me a little time to get myself together as I looked over. And I kept staring at Mr. Garrison. And he told me, he said, speak to the audience. Stop looking at me, speak. Now I will let you know that Mr. Garrison, I fell in love with him. Why did I fall in love with him? Because he was a man who was a white man who believed in doing away with slavery. I never met a white man. Everybody I met were black trying to run from slavery, but here you have a free white man that's helping, that want to help us in slavery. So yes, he became my hero, my mentor, and I really looked up to him. And that's why when it was time for me to speak, I took at least 5 minutes standing at the podium staring at him. But when I got the gall and the nerve to speak, I told those people out there, I said, down south, in the slave territory, black folks, we are whipped like animals. Down in the south, we as black folks, we are handled with whips. We are hung. We are treated as second-class citizens. There has to be a stop to those type of living. My people must be free. And then I backed away from the podium and I went to step off. And as I went to go back to my seat, Mr. Garrison, he grabbed me and he brought me back to the people. And he said, did we just finish hearing a thing? And everybody out there screamed, no! Should we turn him back into slavery? No! Would you like to hear more from this man? He called me a man. They said, yes! So right away, he hired me. And I went on a 6-month speaking tour. Oh, here's the big thing, ladies and gentlemen. I was making 75 cents a speech. Now just imagine. I can think back to when they used to, when the alls used to send me to the store. And they would give me a penny for going to the store. I can think back when Master Huard got me, or Thomas Hard got me out of jail. And he taught me a craft working at the shipyard. They were paying me 10 cents. And he would take 9 of that cents. And I got to the point that, ladies and gentlemen, when I started making 25 cents, I didn't tell him I was making 25 cents. I told him I was still making 10 cents. So, guess what? He took 9 of that 10, which left me 16 cents. And I would take that 16 cents and go bury it out in the woods and save it until that ultimate day of September the 3rd, 1838. So now I'm working for Mr. Garrison, making what? 75 cents a speech. And I'll have you know, as I traveled all the states within the northern, western towns and the eastern towns, that money that I would make, I would send it immediately. I would send it back to Anna. And Anna would use that money to take care of our children. And not only that, I'll have you know, she used to iron my clothes, and she would special deliver them to me in whatever town I was in. So when I approached and got up to that podium, I would get up there, the cleanest black man they ever saw. Yes. And not only that, because there was a lot of Democrats out there who hated the fact that there were people out there fighting for slaves. There were times that I would get thrown, the rotten potatoes or tomatoes would be thrown at me, eggs would be thrown at me. And at one time, I had about 5 or 6 audience members rush the stage. And I had sworn that after that fight with Master Corbet, that I would never allow anyone to come and dominate me. It was either I was going to die or they would die. And fortunately, in one of the fights that I had, that They almost damaged this hand. Ladies and gentlemen, if they would have damaged this hand, the 3 best-selling books that I wrote, that they didn't believe I wrote, would never have came to pass. The narrative in the life of Frederick Douglass, which was my first book, they didn't believe I wrote this book. And would you believe? Mr. Garrett Smith told me, he said, Fred, if I was you, I would take that book and I'll throw it in the fire. Get rid of it. Well, at one town hall meeting, well, it's over there. Fortunately, I got another one. At one town hall meeting, I just came out and told the audience that I wrote this book. And I have you know, the audience, the house was packed that night, and I sold those books, copies of these books, for 50 cents a copy. And not only did they purchase these books, but these books wound up selling all over the world, if you will. And they made 5 different copies of the book. And that allowed me and Anna to live the life that we wished. Well, after that, because I told all my masters, Mr. Garrison said, we got to get you out of here. They put me on a boat, and they sent me to the United Kingdom. I got over there, and I stayed over there for 2 years. And in those 2 years, I had the great pleasure of meeting Mrs. Richardson and her friend. And while we were at a gala, and I'm standing there, sir, after speaking, and I got wine. Now, I don't know if you all ever went to a gala all dressed up. When you get dressed up, you get stiff. You don't want to wrinkle anything. The women, they get stiff as well. Yes. So anyway, I'm sitting here drinking my wine. Miss Richardson approaches me and she says, Frederick, we got some news for you. And I'm like, well, what is the news? We sent $750 to your master, Hugh Art. You are now free. Well, I took a sip, sir, and I almost choked over it. And I pondered for a moment, and I said, I'm free? She says, yes, you're free. Well, and then she went on to tell me, she said, Frederick, you do not have to go back to America. You can stay here, and you can bring your family here, and you can live a nice life. We'll set you up in a nice home, we'll set you to get your kids in school and what have you. And it sounded good. But then I told her, I said, you know, I must go back to America. I must go back and I must suffer with the rest of my people. I must go back and I must fight so that my people can gain their freedom such as I. And not only that, the word came that my daughter had passed, Annie, at 10 years old. So that was 2 reasons for me to get back to America. Now I got on the boat. It took me 38 days to get back here. When I did get back here, I came in through Canada as not to be detected. And I made it back to the home. And ladies and gentlemen, when I made it back to the home, I made it back to the home a free man. Yes, a free man. And not only that, Miss Richardson, she put some extra cash in my pocket so that I could come up with the North Star newspaper, which I did. And I also came up with the Frederick Douglass Weekly newspaper. That newspaper was a joint effort of myself and Mr. Garrett Smith with his newspaper. And one thing I had on my paper was, white is not the color of your skin. I will work with anybody who desires to do right. It does not matter your sex, and it does not matter your color. But it do matter that we work together to end slavery. And that's what we did. Well, as time went on, Mr. Garrison and I, we did not see the Constitution through the same eyes. He saw the Constitution as something that would destroy slavery. I saw the Constitution as something that would free slaves. And that's where we began to separate. So much so, ladies and gentlemen, I had visitors that would come in from England, from UK, from all over the world that would stay there in the house with us. They were women. And Mr. Garrison printed in his Liberator newspaper that Frederick Douglass is opening his home to all kind of women, despite the fact that his wife is there with him. That really broke me. That broke me. Now keep in mind, my Anna, she could not read. But Rosetta, my daughter, could read. And she really was upset at that. And that broke Mr. Garrison and I as friends and working together. The question was asked of me, well, did you all regain your friendship? We did regain our friendship. Sir, we regained our friendship very loosely. So loosely that when Mr. Garrison passed away, instead of me going to his homegoing, I wrote a note and sent it to him. That's how much of a friend we were after that time. And God bless his soul. Yes. Well, moving on, because I know time is moving on, and ladies and gentlemen, my Anna is awaiting me. Yes. So you all are looking at me and saying, wait a minute, she's waiting, yeah. So what happens is, I'll find my way back to Rochester, New York, and I'll remove the crib, and I'll lay back down, and once I lay back down, I'll put the crib back on, and I'll say, honey, I'm home. So anyway, moving on, like I said with the newspaper, as time went on, I had the great pleasure, one of the milestones of my life was meeting no other than President Abraham Lincoln. Ladies and gentlemen, if you know the backstory of Mr. Lincoln and I basically had somewhat the same type of growing up. Meaning that Mr. Lincoln, as a child, he had a hard life. Mr. Lincoln, his father, was very strict on Mr. Lincoln as he was growing up. So that led to him being minus on education. Yes, can you imagine? He was minus on education. And as he grew up, he had the great distinct pleasure of meeting his wife, Mary Lincoln. Now let me tell you a little story about Mary Lincoln. Mary Lincoln, believe it or not, she had boyfriends before she met the president. And one of her boyfriends was no other than Stephen Douglas. Stephen Douglas had two S's at the end of his name like mine. Stephen Douglas, who was a staunch, notice how I said that, he was a staunch racist, and he strongly believed in slavery. Well, him and Mary, they were courting each other. And Mary also had slaves as well. Well, as time went on, Mr. Stephen Douglas put his hat in the ring to become president. He was vying to become the 16th president of these United States. Not only was he vying to become president, there was a gentleman by the name of Mr. Richardson, who also was vying. Now, I'm